Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome back and Happy New Year. It has been a little bit of a slow start for me. We came out of the holiday break and I still had the kids home for a week. So I thought I'd be able to work during that week. And of course, nothing ever quite plans out the way you think it's going to plan out. Plus, I think there was a little bit of exhaustion still ruminating from the holidays and having company over and all the busyness that comes with this holiday season. And then my period came the week the kids went back to school, this week. And so it's just been a slow start. And I've really reminded myself to move slow and to really reflect on what truly needs to be tended to and what can pause and wait. That's kind of the motivation that I have going into 2025 this year is how can I really take what I teach and apply it next level? It is so important for me this year to really make sure that I continue to do the nervous system healing work that I've been working on and really working hard at keeping balance in my life. Because I know what the opposite does to me. I know what it's like when I get into that adrenal fatigue or that chronic exhaustion or that overwhelm and burnout. And, we'll get into the whole scope of where I'm going with this. But this year, it's really a year for me to anchor into the teachings, for me to go back to the roots of what it is that I believe so deeply in and to making sure that I instill it, because it's really easy, especially as an entrepreneur, especially as a busy mom, to just fall back into the patterns that were kind of inherited and have been trained in my system for 40 plus years. And so breaking these norms and breaking these ways of believing we have to behave can be hard, even when we have all the tools, all the wisdom, all the resources. We can easily fall back into that trap. And so all that to say, this podcast is coming out a few days late because my period started and I was like, no, we need to ease back into it. And I don't know if anybody else has had their period happen since the start of since after the holidays, but my gosh, this one was like one that I have not had in years. Like I want to say probably 10 years. And it really reinforced what I already knew, that lack of sleep, poor nutrition, too much sugar, too much overwhelm to the nervous system, too much go will really throw your whole menstrual cycle out of balance. So I don't look at it as, oh my God, this cycle is horrible. Instead, I look at it as like a clear reminder of like, yeah, you really didn't take care of yourself and your body's showing you that when you don't do that, this is how crappy you feel. To really instill and help to remind myself of why I do the things I do in my life. It is because when I do, my body loves me and it makes my periods flow and brings ease and just gentleness. So if you haven't had your period yet and you do end up getting in the next couple of weeks and it is a doozy, just know it may be the residualness of whatever you piled on yourself during the holiday season. So this episode in particular, I wanted to dive into what all of us do January 1st, of making resolutions, of mapping out our year, of creating our vision boards, or whatever your thing might be. And I wanted to share with you an approach that I took this year. This is a little bit different than what I've done in the years past, but it really felt aligned with where I'm going in my life and what I'm trying to accomplish and where I want my work to go. So this year I decided to, with the inspiration that I've seen on Instagram, to pull out some large brown packing paper, I guess I would call, like, like what you would see like the old time parcels wrapped in. And I literally grid out and created a 12-month calendar on this piece of paper. But I did a little bit differently. I did it in quarters. So, because this is where it gets really challenging of trying to look at how the world operates and then also trying to bring in what we know works best for feminine energy, what works best for women's bodies. So I tried to incorporate the two. So the modern world, we work in quarters. We work in like what happened in your first quarter, what happened in your second quarter. So I booked it off in quarters, but I tried to also book it off according to the energy that's behind the seasons. So I made my first quarter, not to map out the actual calendar quarter. I made it from winter solstice to spring equinox. So from December 21st down to March 21st. So the first quarter, it really does kind of follow the calendar of January, February, and then March, knowing that that last week of March is actually going to be more spring energy. And I actually even marked that on there as the transition week. And then obviously winter solstice, it started about a week and a half before we hit January, but that's a holiday crazy season and it already passed and I didn't really feel like I needed to document that, but I will mark it in the other quarters. So I made in one column, I did the 3 months, and at the very top of that column, I called it winter to represent the winter months, to represent the winter solstice energy. And then beside that, I also put rest and reflect. And the next column, which would have been my spring column, which would have gone from April, May, June. If we're following the seasonal aspects, it would start March 21st and go till June 21st, 22nd, somewhere in there. I never know if it's the 21st or the 22nd, because some people say it's the 22nd, some people say it's the 21st. I guess it's all based upon the astrology, the calendar, I'm not sure. So one of those 2 days. You have to look at your calendar to see which day it actually lands on. So then for the spring, when I wrote spring at top, I put plan and initiate. And in that last week of June, I marked that on the calendar as my transition week into summer energy. And then for summer, obviously I did the July, August, September. And I put summer at the top of that one with my words to remember as connect and play. And then for October, November, December, I put fall and I wrote the words focus and complete. Now, the reason why I did it in these like 4 columns with 3 months each is because we have 4 seasons. These are the 4 ways that we try to respect our menstrual cycle in those 4 phases. But this is also the energy that we feel when we really slow down and listen and tap into what's happening environmentally around us. It kind of has the same flavor. Now, what I also did is at the bottom of that column for each quarter, I put down universe's to-do list. This is one of my favorite things that I learned from being in so many of Kate Northrup's programs and having her do less planner, was that she did on a weekly basis of saying like what was her universe's to-do list. I put it at the bottom of the quarter. And why I did that was because sometimes the universe's to-do list takes more than a week, takes more than a month. But it's the stuff that we know has to happen, but it's not worth our time or our energy to resource to look for it. It's one of those things that we can put out into the universe. And if we believe in the spiritual aspect of believing that it will come to us. So like, for instance, once upon a time on my universe's to-do list, I said, find me a female family doctor taking new patients. It was really important for me because my doctor had retired that my next doctor be a female physician, because I have 2 daughters that were, in a few years, we're going to be coming up to puberty. And I decided that at this phase of my life, feeling how my nervous system reacted with having male physicians do pap smears on me it created a trauma response in me. Not that they ever did anything. There was just this ancestral trauma that goes towards my body, and I just wanted a female physician. So I put it on my universe's to-do list, and I am not joking. Within a few months, there was a female practitioner who opened up a practice walking distance from my house, accepting new clients. This is the power of the universe's to-do list. So some things that I put in the universe's to-do list is things that like career objectives that I really want to make, but might need some help. Like I this year really would like to do more public speaking gigs. So on there, I've put how many public speaking gigs I really would like to receive in the first quarter. So our universe's to-do list is things that we can put on there and just leave it and trust it in the hands of the universe to find it for us, or for those connections to come into play. Now, alongside each month, I gave a little bit of space in between the columns. And why I did this, I wanted to leave little spaces for each month for me to create reflection. So these reflection questions that I put there is, one was important astrological dates. So if you're somebody who follows astrology, I loosely follow it. I by no means understand it very deeply, but I have an app and I pay for it. And then it tells me, as a Leo rising, what's in the forecast for me this year, like what dates are really important for me to remember. I found it really helpful last year using this because it helped me see, like, there were certain days where it wasn't my astrology for 2024 that I should launch a program, or that I should take the risk of, asking for what I wanted, right? Or there was one date that it was like, this is a good night to really connect, or a good day to really connect with your partner, like to deepen that love relationship. So if you explore this realm of things, I highly recommend for each month putting down important astrological dates for your rising sign. So that way it's just there. So that way when you're mapping out when you want to do things, you have these dates in mind as kind of like your power dates. And then the next thing I have there is big ideas and projects for the month, like things that I really want to make sure I accomplish. I don't load this with a lot of stuff. I put one or two things so that I can really create hyper focus on those two things. So just like how the universe has its to-do list, this is like the to-do list that I know I need to tend to and nurture and create awareness around. And then at the bottom of those two, I put learning moments for the month and what I'm celebrating this month. So why I added those two is I really wanted to walk away from looking, like, let's say at January, and saying, these things came to me, like these things happened in my business, in my personal life. These were the things that were wins, right? Because I think so often we're just so busy checking the to-do list that we forget all the little things that worked out, all the little magical moments that happened that were really big wins. And for me, like, one of my wins already in January is my daughter and I having a really big heart-to-heart conversation that was healing for both of us, for our nervous system. And it wasn't even something that happened. It was something that happened in the past that keeps popping up into my memory. So if it's popping up into my memory, there's a good chance it was popping up into hers. So I did something scary and I confronted it, and I talked about how I felt that I let her down as a mom. And we really had this amazing moment of connection, of healing, of where I could apologize, where I could really make sure that she received that apology, but then for her to have space to be able to really communicate back to me how she was feeling, if that memory is still there for her, right? Like, this is some deeper work that I really wanted to do with her, and it was great. And so that was a win for me, right? So another win for me is that I have, worked out 3 times in the first week. Like, I committed and I did it, because I will be honest, I'm one of the people where my work always comes first and my body always comes second. And I said, no, this year, even if it's only 15 minutes, I'm going to make sure that no matter how crappy I'm feeling, 15 minutes, at least 3 times a week, hopefully 5. And so that was a win for me that week. So I don't have it broken on weeks, but I have it broke out for the month. And so I repeat these 4 questions on every month. And so I just have a little column beside each month before the next quarter starts. Now, the other thing that's a really big, important aspect that came to my yearly planning this year, that this is like the massive takeaway that I want everyone to think about maybe doing, is planning out your whole cycle for the whole year. And I know this can feel very claustrophobic and very scary because the questions will come up. What happens if my cycle is off? What happens if, I don't have a regular cycle? What happens if my cycle came early and now it threw off the whole year? So I really thought about this and I was like, how can I make this simpler? And I have some ideas in mind for the future, how I can make it simple. But in the moment when I was like, I'm doing this and I need to do this, how can I do it right in the moment? I had a few ideas. So first, what I did is I printed off a 24-month calendar, just like a one sheet, the small little calendar. There's nothing that you can write in. It just shows all the dates for the year. And I literally went through with my highlighter and I highlighted, pink for my period, green for spring, because that's when the grass comes up, yellow for summer, because that's when the sun's the brightest. And then I used purple for the fall because it's the fall. There was no rhyme or reason to the purple color. And so with that, I mapped out the whole year. So I looked at where I was in my cycle and then it was like, okay, so 7 days from now, this is where I'll be. This is 7 days from now. And I just did each of those phases of my cycle as a 7-day block. And I know that you don't ovulate for 7 days, but the energetics of the feeling of summer for me, I find it easy. I find it easy for me to follow, to just give myself a week in the summer energy where I'm social and I'm outgoing, because it's usually day 19 where it's like a hard stop of I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to be social. I start feeling really irritated being around my family. I have to take more time for self-care. Like I know the swap into that fall energy. And so like do what's best for you. But for me, it's blocking off for just like a week for each of the 4 phases. Now, if you don't have a regular cycle, you can use the moon calendar too. You could literally do the same color coding for new moon, the waxing quarter, the full moon, and then the waning quarter, if that works better. Now, I did this on a one sheet so I could map it out really quickly. And then what my thought process is how do I put this on the big scope of things, but I want them to be so that I can move them in case if my cycle does change, so I can change things if needed. So what I ended up doing is for the first quarter is using color coding system. And then for the other 3 quarters, I just wrote with a pencil, M for menstruating, F for follicular, O for ovulation, and L for luteal. You could also do the seasons of winter, spring, summer, fall as well for your cycle, and just write it in pencil because it's easy to erase it and adjust it if needed. And I didn't put it on every day. I just put it on the start date. So the day that I predicted my period would start, that's when I put in M. And then a week later on that exact same day, I put in F. And then exactly a week later, so that it was just that I had it loosely mapped out. And then at the beginning of each quarter, I'll go in there and readjust the color coding if my cycle changed in that previous quarter. Now for the winter quarter for myself, the way I did it, so that way I felt like I could adjust things if needed on the fly, is I had 2 ideas. One idea I had was getting like little strips of Post-it notes that I could cut out, one for each day of each color system. So 7 pink ones, 7 green ones, just kind of like how I do for a highlighter, but then that way they'd be across the days and I could see the color coding that way. So that was one idea I had. What I would love to do in the future is to maybe even laminate those so that way, and then put like some fun tack on the back so that way it's easy to move them around, would be my idea for next year. But because I wanted to get this accomplished, the idea I had to replace the actual laminated, so I have them every year, was just to do the Post-it notes. But then I came up with even a better idea that was way easier, and that was just to go to the dollar store and buy the little circle stickers, like the little pin drop ones that have all the colors on them. And so like the different colors. And so it was really easy for me to do red, blue, green, and yellow. And I did it that way with just those dots. The beautiful thing about those dots is that you can peel them off the paper and you can reorganize them if you want to. You can also just, because you're just doing a quarter, so it's only 3 months, you can just, if there's a big change in your cycle, you can just put a new sticker on top of those ones as well. It will waste most stickers, but for this year, it will do for me. So I did the dot system, but I needed something to see in the quarter where approximately my color coding would be of where I predict I'm going to be in my cycle as I map things out. And for me, this is the most important piece that I want women to do. And I really want you to think about as part of your planning is really acknowledging before you put dates in your calendar where you're going to be at. It is going to simplify your life. It is going to make it so that way you can enjoy what you're committing yourself to. And it is really a way for us to bend time to create more time when we plan efficiently like this. So once I had that done, what I did is I knew how I want to launch things. I know that my cyclical program only runs once a year and it runs in the fall. I know my Living in Flow program, I like to run it twice a year, maybe 3 times. This next coming year, it's only going to be twice. And so I took the one pager that I had and I scoped out where I wanted to put these 3 launch dates for myself in the calendar. I made sure that when I was launching, I was in my spring energy. The reason why is because I usually launch for about a week and a half to maybe 2 weeks. So this way I have the energy. It was really important for me just not to schedule myself to do a launch when I was going to be in my follicular phase, my luteal phase, so my inner fall phase, or my period/winter phase, because that is where I end up sucking all my energy, where I deplete myself and I run into burnout the following cycle. So for me, this was like the magical key. And this is something that I do on a monthly basis, but I've never done it on a full yearly scope like this. So I planned it that way, that I was going to be launching in those times. And then I also planned that my start dates of my programs would also start when I was not on my period. It was really important for me to respect those times. So once I had like my big business scope of those launches that I had to do, then I just filled in the other stuff. Like, we're going on a vacation to Mexico. Where was that going to land in my cycle, right? Making sure that I was out of my control. I booked it because of the price and not because of the dates. But then at least I could prepare myself of where energetically I might want to be, because half of the battle is your own mindset of knowing why you feel the way you feel, right? So for me, it is going to be the week before my period that we're going there. So I know that I'm going to need a little bit more like lazy time or alone time. So I've just planned and I've communicated already with my partner that, I'm going to bring extra books, and there might be times where I just need a little personal time out. The beautiful thing about vacation, at least I find for myself, is that I only have the stressor of my family at that point. I don't have all the other stressors, like the mental overload of thinking about how I have to get a child to all these different things, or what the homework is going to look like, or who has a test, what bills have to be paid, what is on the docket for my work, all of the things, right? Like how we carry all that mental workload. I don't have to carry that. So that is a big release for me. So even though I'm going to be in that phase of my cycle, when we're on vacation, I don't have to carry all that extra stress with me. So that's kind of nice. It does mean that airport stress is probably going to be a little too much for me. So I'll just have to keep that in check. And it also means that I have to make sure I'm also getting enough sleep. I know that sleep is super important for me in this phase of my cycle. If I don't get enough sleep, everyone else pays, right? So I just have to really be cognitive of making sure that I'm going to bed early enough so that I'm getting enough rest. And then that will really pace it out. But this is the beauty, is that when you can mark out when vacations are going to land, when I mark out when my kids' birthdays land, what part of my cycle am I going to be in? Because and I did this last year, it helps you to figure out when you're going to put on a kid's birthday party as well, right? And so my one daughter, we did hers a week later, which was perfect because then I wasn't on my period. I wasn't exhausted from having to do a birthday party. So I put these major events. So I put birthdays, I put vacations that are being planned. I put my big work events, my big launches that I know I need to do. I'm also on the board of directors for the menopause mission. So on there, I throw our events for those so I know where I'll be. Because really the most important thing is that sometimes you cannot plan to fit your cycle, but knowing that is the power. Being able to know how you're going to feel when you're in those events or when those times are going to come, it makes all the difference for you to be able to feel empowered in caring for yourself and setting the appropriate boundaries and knowing where your limitations lie, knowing where your superpowers are and where your Achilles heels are. And with that, you can really create an environment where you can only succeed. So I share this with you because I know it's coming to you 9 days late. So you might have already done your yearly planning, but if you have, I would still invite you to go in there, even with some kind of sticker or Post-it note color system, or just even a pencil of writing. I like colors. I think when you're visually, when you see colors, it hits home a bit more than a pencil mark. But I decided to do pencil marks for the other quarters, just so that way when it came to the beginning of the spring quarter, I could go in there and I could just do that. Now, the other big thing that I want to just circle back to, because I said at the beginning, at the top of each quarter, I wrote the season and then my terms that I wanted to remember. Now, this was really important for me because I wanted that to be the essence of what that quarter was about. So for me, this being the winter quarter of January, February, March, and my words being rest and reflect, I wanted most of my energy to go towards that. I do have one launch happening in that quarter, but that is it. And I have really booked it, and I purposely booked that launch to happen at the end of the winter. So it's going to happen in March. So that way I know, just like with my period, those first few days, I'm really lethargic. I don't have much motivation. I'm low on energy and I have superpowers here, but it's not to get stuff done. But I know that on day 5 of my cycle, that's usually when I get this spring of energy and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get things done. And I usually go a little too hard. I usually end up getting a little exhausted 2 days later because I wasn't fully rebounded yet into my spring energy. I was still in that winter energy. So I booked this launch for March. So that way I would be at the end of the winter quarter. And I wanted to make sure that I was really utilizing these months to really own in the rest and the reflect. So I don't have all the answers of what the year is going to look for me. I don't have all the answers of what I want to do this whole year, and which is why I didn't fill out the whole calendar either. I really wanted to honor that these, especially January and February, I'm going to ask myself the big questions. What really are my goals this year? Why are they my goals? What is it? What is the felt sense that I want to accomplish? Like, what do I want to feel in my body? What's important to me in all arenas of my life? So I'm going to really spend some time in these months marinating and, still keeping my business going, but also spending majority of my time in that reflection state. That's where I'm going to use my sorcery, my superpowers for. And then I do have the full intention that when March 21st hits and we get into that spring equinox energy, that is when I'm going to go into the spring energy of plan and initiate, right? So when March comes about, that is where I'm really going to take some time, especially in that last week of March, going into the first week of April. Okay, so now what does the rest of the scope of the year look like? What is the things? Now that I've rested and reflected and I have a good vision of where I want this year to go, how can I map out what I need to do in order for those visions to become reality. And then in my summer months, I'm really going to take time in the summer to connect and play. This doesn't mean I just don't work. I'm spending a lot of time with the family focus, but my connection is like, this is my time to really network with other people. I'm going to put most of my intention and my energy behind how can I get in front of people? How can I speak more of my truth and more of what I'm doing and what I'm putting out into the world? And then fall, once kids get back into school, it's going to be like, okay, what do I need to focus on to complete the year? What is some of the things that maybe I didn't tend to yet? Or maybe it's, what do I need to do, like list building per se, or refocusing, like finding new guests for the podcast. A lot of that focus is going to be in that focus and complete section of the last quarter of the year. Because the thing is just like energetically, the seasons that are environmental, that are happening with us, these are also carrying out in our body as well. And so I really want to use the superpowers that the environment gives us. How can I create more ease to be fully embodied in the process, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So this is what I'm putting out to you. First, color code your system. However you're doing your system, color code, map out where you are in your cycle. This is going to be the most important thing that you do this year. Second of all, look at the seasons, and whether you map it out like I did, or whether you just have like a calendar that's already coiled, and just each month, like for the month of January, at the top of it, you write rest and reflect, February, rest and reflect, like put your key terms each month at the top of that calendar, so that it's a reminder of what the environmental energy is out there. What is your body interacting with? And then from there, if you want, you can go deeper in what is your universe's to-do list? What are the astrological dates that are going to impact maybe your success? What are some big ideas and projects, and how do they land? And are they landing in the right season? I have learned very clearly that I cannot do anything in December, especially the end of December. Like, I had visions of getting some work done during that 2-week break that the kids were going to be home. And I was exhausted. And I was like, yes, because winter solstice, it's the darkest days of the year. You know, we don't have a lot of sunlight here in Canada during after that winter solstice. Why am I trying to push myself to do things? Like, I just didn't want to do it. So I'm leaning more into the energy that I'm receiving and really aligning it to the cycles within the cycles within the cycles that we live within. So I truly believe this is the key for women to not burn out, for us to be able to utilize our energy wisely, so that way we do accomplish everything, but just with a different outlook, with a new system. And I really believe that this is how we begin to reclaim our lives, so that we have capacity to be all aspects of who we truly visioned we wanted to be, right? We all, not we all, myself, I know myself, I really wanted to be a mom. But to be honest, I did not prepare myself for what that would all come with as well, of how much of myself I would lose in that process. And that's not because I'm a mom. That is because society has kind of set us up that you're supposed to be this superhuman person that just does the same thing on rinse and repeat every day. I've been able to start to reclaim myself as a mom, as a partner, as a business owner, through using my cycle and just really weaving the wisdom and setting boundaries and knowing what I excel at and when. So that way I really can be this vision in my head of what I want it to be without completely sacrificing myself. So this is how I'm planning out my year. I hope this is helpful. I hope it gives you some insights of maybe how you can do it that's cycle aligned, that's womb aligned. And I really hope it helps. And if it does, if there's any takeaways that you've put into practice and you're like, this was amazing, please send that feedback back. I would love to celebrate your wins as well with doing this new way of creating a cycle synced year planner, I guess. So go out, have fun, get some stickers, have some highlighters, and this is your craft project going into the beginning of January.
Are you excited about aligning to your cycle? If so, make sure that you subscribe to this podcast and like the episode if it really resonated with you. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired.